I identified that he F2'd his army the last time. So this is so sometimes I say this, but I don't ever explain, like, okay, what do you mean by I identified that my opponent is F2'ing their army? So here's a couple things you can do. Obviously, I cannot see his hotkeys, but if you look, I'm correct. He F2's all of his units. The way that we can figure this out, there were two things that happened this game. And actually, I want to take a moment to explain, like, okay, how can you identify an F2'ing player, and what can you do as a result of that? So if you can figure out that your opponent isn't actually using hotkeys or is putting everything on one hotkey, you can really take a good amount of advantage from that. Run-bys do exceedingly well versus those types of people. Doing split pushes, basically their entire army is going to be grouped together in one spot, right? So if you attack two different locations at once, they're not going to really be able to react the way that they want to be. Now, mech is a little bit more forgiving for F2'ing. However, they're going for battle mech, which is not as great. Plus, they have an air unit, and so it gets really complicated. So two things happened. Number one, when they warped their BC in, he was microing it around. That was looking fine. One of the first kind of very light flags that I got was that there was no Hellion attack at that same time. Any player who's playing Hellion BC should attack you at both times with both of those units, because there's just no reason not to. In case I knee-jerk F2, or I'm not prepared, or I'm not looking at the minimap because I'm focusing really hard on that BC, or vice versa, I'm looking for the Hellions and that BC is doing a lot of damage. It's just a really smart thing for Terrans to do. He didn't end up doing that, so that's one sort of very, very small thing that I can say, hey, this guy might be F2'ing his units. The second thing is when I do this attack over here, right, he eventually pulls back his BC right here. You can see that he F2'd all of his units here, completely in the way of my queens. Now, could this have been a mistake and he just accidentally selected, or he selected it, sent it back home? Yeah, sure. Absolutely. He could have totally done that. But these are just sort of little indicators, little flags, right? The big one, though, that we saw, if we fast forward the game a little bit, is that when I moved across the map with my corruptors, I noticed something. Whenever you see this, you see how all of his units are basically heading to the exact same spot. His Viking, his BC, his Hellions, and his siege tanks. Everything is going into the exact same position. That is an F2, for sure. He is controlling all of these units at once, and he told them all to go into the center area. Again, it's not necessarily a bad thing that he did that, but you could take a reasonable assumption at this point. Hey, he might not actually use hotkeys for his army, and he might just F2 everything. So we use that a little bit later on here. We'll go ahead and fast forward it, because, again, he's like, whatever, it doesn't matter. This goes the way that it goes. We use that a little bit later on. We set up that run by. So at this point, I had identified, hey, I think this guy, he doesn't use hotkeys for his army. So once we start doing this, once we start doing the caustic spray onto this command center, I line up a Ling side attack here with the hopes that he has made some units, because I had corruptors sitting over top of his base for a while. He's made some units that can attack it. And look at this. He's sending everything over here when really all he needs to send is a Cyclone. So at the same time I start doing that, without seeing it, I go in with the Lings at the same time here. And he's so focused on trying to get these corruptors away that he not only loses all the SCVs here, but he also loses this. Well, that's probably just because he doesn't have enough stuff. And eventually just gets frustrated enough and moves across the map. I mean, we really screwed up this guy's economy, so it makes sense. But yeah, that's a little quick lesson, just a little like small tip on how you can maybe identify that your opponent is an F2 Andy. It's for Zerg players, we're taught so like early on, and it's just really not a good thing for us to F2 our army around. So I feel like Zerg is the least the least offenders of an F2, but Terran and Protoss, they do it all the time. They do it all the time. In the heat of battle, when they just need to pull stuff over, and they're not thinking, and their reaction just hits that F2, that sweet, juicy F2 button. You'll see Protoss that don't leave units in the wall. You'll see Terran that move all their units away from one of their bases, and you can get some damage done. Try and look for that in your guys' games if you feel comfortable enough in the game. If you can identify those little flags, if you can train yourself to look for them, you can use that really well. You can get a lot of damage done with run-bys in those situations that I found. So hopefully that's helpful. Clip it and ship it, baby. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.